I'm just going to tell you the names of the vampires. Because it's like I'm just going to tell them, okay? Hello everyone and welcome back to Mariana Math Books. My name is Mariana and today I am here with a current reads video about a personal reading project that I am doing that I had actually already filmed a video for, but unfortunately I accidentally deleted the footage. This was supposed to go up before November because it's a project that I'm doing during November. But since that footage is lost and I wanted to talk about the project because I'm very excited about it, I'm filming this video as a current reads, and so this is what this is. So a few months ago, I think, my friend Elle from Elle Thinks uploaded a video about a personal reading project that she did about reading vampire books. She likes to experiment with different topics and themes and genres to learn about herself as a reader. As you know, if you've watched my channel before, I do a lot of body reading with Elle, and we always talk about ourselves as readers, what we like, what we don't, and we think that is a fascinating topic. And so she did this experiment to find out if she likes vampire videos, books, if she doesn't, what she likes, what she doesn't, etc., and how that informs her about herself as a reader. When I watched that video, I was super excited and inspired to do my own vampire reading project. So I decided to do this as like a VR tarot tube for booktube people. TarotTube has this really cool thing where they do VRs or video responses. So if someone talks about a topic that they think is interesting, someone will do a VR to that topic, a video response to that topic, and then sometimes everyone joins and does more VRs. And I really like it because it's truly a conversation that goes beyond the comment section, right? So like you are conversing with the person who created that video. And so when I saw that video, I thought, oh, I'm going to make a VR video about my personal vampire reading project. I was very interested in doing it because as a teenager, I was a mega fan of Twilight. I loved Twilight. I loved the books. I got all my friends to read them. We were all fans. We would geek out about it. We would do very cringy things like get excited when it was rainy because we would think, oh, the Collins would be at school today. So we were fans. I was a fan, and because I was a Twilight fan, I became a vampire fan. And I think that during the Twilight era, a lot of vampire content started to come up. I'm not sure if Twilight came after or before, or if Twilight started the trend, or if Twilight joined at an existing trend. I'm not going to talk about that because I didn't Google it, and now I'm thinking that maybe Twilight didn't start the trend but rather joined the trend. Regardless, there was a lot of vampire stuff. So you had the Vampire Diaries, which is also based on a book series that I didn't read, but I honestly have no interest in reading. And then you had True Blood in HBO, which was also based in a book series that I also didn't read and also have no interest in reading, but I did enjoy the shows, both Vampire Diaries and True Blood. And of course you have, classic vampire stories and stuff like Interview with a Vampire, which is now kind of a classic. And as a teenager, I just found the whole concept very vibey, very romantic, very, the gothic, dark type of ambience that I loved, which, ironically, Twilight and Vampire Diaries, and I would say also True Blood, neither of those have the gothic classic vibes because they are all urban fantasy in current times, or rather, in the 2000s. And so, but I really like this idea, this concept of the thousands-year-old being and all that brings with it. And so, yeah, I've always, or rather, as a teenager, I was always interested in vampires and vampire aesthetic, I'm going to say. All that to say that as an adult, I realized when I was watching Elle's video, I realized that as an adult, I haven't really read any vampire books. And there are many adult vampire romances, and I haven't read any of them. And I really like paranormal romance. Actually, my favorite type of romance nowadays are werewolf romance, which as a Twilight fan is honestly like a teenager me would feel betrayed that I now love werewolves because I was heavily Team Edward back in the day. Um, but I thought it was interesting that as an adult I've never actually read any vampire romances, and that as an adult I'm now also interested more in the classic side of vampires, like classic vampire stories, more gothic vampire stories. And so I wanted to do this experiment and try it out now as an adult, reading vampire books and joining Elle. Now, I also want to honor my friend Jenny from Jennifer Brooks, who sadly passed away at the beginning of the year. But I think about her all the time when I'm reading. I considered myself like a kindred spirit, or consider her a kindred spirit in our tastes, in our likes, and I just really, really resonated with everything she said. And she also loved vampires, and she loved them from the perspective of more this like philosophical, I'm going to say philosophical sense of this question of immortality and what does immortality imply, and all the interesting conversations that come along with it. She didn't like urban fantasy at all. She hated monsters with cell phones, as she put it. I personally love monsters with cell phones. I love urban fantasy, but she really liked the classic vampire, the romantic vampire. And one of her favorite books was Interview with a Vampire, which I really, really want to read. And she loved the trope of Death and the Maiden, or she called it that, which is this idea of the thousands-year-old immortal vampire and the maiden, right? And what that dynamic does, and the conversations about what immortality means. And anyway, so I want to honor her as well because she also sparked again my interest in vampires um, as an adult. And finally, there are two tarot tubers, Bailey and Rachel. I will link their channels down below, who started a readathon slash book tag in TarotTube called Gothlitnovember, which is to read Gothic literature in November. I have several booktube friends who would be very into Gothlitnovember, and I wish it would translate to both worlds, both tarot and booktube. But anyway, I am in both worlds. I jump around in both worlds, in booktube and tarotube. And so I was really excited when I saw last year that they were going to do their Gothlitnovember project. And I kind of participated last year, but I kind of failed, honestly. And this year they are doing it again. And so when I saw Elle's project, and I thought I want to do my vampire book project, and it was right in time for Gothlitnovember. They do have prompts, but I think that vampires very much fit the spirit of Gothlitnovember, whether it's modern vampires or classic vampires. And so I thought it would be super fun to join in on Gothlitnovember with my vampire book project specifically. And so this is what I'm doing. And this is literally the video that I had filmed to go up um, before November started, where I explained everything about the project. But as I said, I'm doing now a current reads because I am in the middle of my vampire project, and I just wanted to quickly talk about it. Tell you about the books that I have read and the books that I'm planning to read, and I'm thinking this project will probably extend beyond November, but I did want to make this video now because I wanted to do the VR, the video response to Elle, and also to Bailey and Rachel for Gothlitnovember, and officially actively be participating with a video. So currently I am in a very romance mood. I hadn't been reading a lot of romance, actually almost any romance this year. But now, currently, I am very much in a romance mood. And so, the two books that I have finished for this project are two romance novels. I have a lot to say about them, but I don't want to wrap up at the moment. I truly don't want to make this video super long. So, I'm not going to wrap them up, I don't think. I'm just going to say the two that I've read are Bride by Elle Hazelwood, which is actually a very twilighty rom-com, vampires and werewolves. I think this counts more as a werewolf book than a vampire book. So, but I did learn some things about myself as a vampire reader while reading that book, so I will save that for the wrap up. And then I just finished Dark Lover by J.R. Ward, which is a book I had been wanting to read since forever, and I have a lot to say because it is objectively a terrible book, and in some ways I didn't like it, but in other ways it was just my type of junk food, just my type of trashy book. And I'm conflicted, but I'm not going to wrap it up at the moment. I'm just going to say it is the most early 2000s thing you have ever read in your entire life. It feels like a bad early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s paranormal TV show. Really awful, which was great. Like, I loved how cheesy and cringy and late 90s, early 2000s it was. I'm not going to wrap it up. I'm just going to tell you the names, okay, because this book follows a brotherhood of vampires. I'm just going to tell you the names of the vampires. Because it's like, I'm just going to tell them, okay? So the main guy is called Wrath, which is like, okay, fine, yeah, sure. But then the other brothers are called Fury, Rage, Torment, and Sadist, with that spelling that you saw on screen. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just like, okay, I'll wrap it up when I do my wrap up. So now, to end the video, I just want to tell you what other books I'm planning to read and other stuff that I'm planning to continue for this project. Number one at the top of my list is Interview with the Vampire, which, as I mentioned, is or was one of Jenny's favorite books, and it's a book that I've wanted to read since, I think, since high school, and for some reason I've never read it. I've never watched the movie either, and I've always wanted to, but I've never watched it because I want to read the book first. And I just think it's a book I'm going to love. I read the first page because that's always what I do before I add a book to my TBR. I read the first page, and if I vibe with the prose, then or with the writing, then I'll add it, and if not, then I won't, even if the premise sounds fantastic. So I read the first page, and I am already obsessed. I am already obsessed. I think it has an amazing premise, and I can't wait. So that's the one I'm going to read now that I have finished Dark Lover. Then I also really want to read Dracula. I've never read Dracula, and I really want to read it. And I also think I'm going to love it because I've heard it's epistolary and boring. I've heard it described that way. I don't think it will be boring for me, but I've heard people say it's super boring. And honestly, like Victorian, is it Victorian? I think it's Victorian. Victorian, Gothic, epistolary, described as boring. It's the recipe for a book I'm going to love. So I'm very excited about that. Then another classic one that I'm going to read is a short story called The Vampire by, I want to say, John Pollidori, I think. And that one I have on audiobook, and it is a little under an hour long, and I'm actually currently soaping one of my tarot decks. For tarot people, you know what it is. I'm soaping the deck so that I can better it fans. So I'm currently soaping a deck, and I just think it would be fantastic to put on my audiobook and soap my deck while I listen to The Vampire by John Pollidori. I read that this was like the first story that introduces like the romantic vampire, and I think it will be great. And so those are like the main ones, but then also I have here this short story collection that I showed last year, I think, that I was going to read for Gothlitnovember, and my goal was to read some short stories. I wasn't going to read it all. So last year I completed a total of 0 stories from this book. It's a short story collection of vampire books, and it's illustrated. I completed 0 stories. So this year my goal with this book is to read more than 0. Honestly, we are like halfway through November, so I don't see myself reading a story from here. Before November is over, but I don't know, maybe I will. I don't know. My goal is to read more than 0, which I think is a doable goal. But you never know with me. But the reason why I think that maybe potentially I would read a story from this collection is because I signed up to a course, a Zoom course with an art historian that is about witches and female vampires. It starts next week, and it's about witches and female vampires in art and literature in the 19th century. And she is giving us some reading material, so we're going to be reading classic short stories from the 19th century about witches and female vampires. So maybe there will be a story in here that I will read for that course. And also I was quickly looking at the index, and The Vampire by John Pollidori is in there. So if I listen to it, I'm just going to count it as read from that book. I'm just going to look at the illustrations And also, Varney the Vampire is there, and that was Jenny's favorite book from last year. She read the entire over 1000 pages. This one has only one of the short stories, but I would really like to read that one also in honor of Jenny. And yeah, so that's that. And also, I had forgotten, but I want to quickly mention it before I go because there are two books by Mexican authors that I also want to read. Actually, now that I think of it, there are three. Okay, wait. Yeah, Mexican authors. This is the Mexican authors section of the video. So the first one, and the one that I am definitely going to read again, this is going to extend beyond November. I'm not going to finish all of this in November, but I'm going to continue this project. So, the first one that I'm definitely going to read, because I actually have that already saved on audio in the app that I used, is called El Vampiro del Virrey, which means the vampire of the viceroy, or the viceroy's vampire. This one is a historical novel, or rather set in a historical period, because it is gothic paranormal fantasy. There is a vampire killing people in 17th century or 18th century. I think it's set during 18th century New Spain, so like Mexican territory, but it was still under. Oh, yeah. It's set in the 18th century, late 18th century, right before the independence war is going to start. And so it's that time period where it was still New Spain, and it was still under the rule of the Spanish crown, but the independence was brewing. The independence started in 1810, and so it's like before that. And it is set then, and it is about a series of murders that are being committed by a vampire. Um, I really want to read that book. It was recommended by a Mexican art historian who I follow on YouTube and I love, and she recommended it, and I added it to my list. It's on my audio, and so I'm definitely going to read that one. Then there is another one that has become kind of a classic that is called El Vampiro de la Colonia Roma, which means the vampire of the Roma. Roma is a very iconic borough in Mexico City. And so that one, I think it's maybe from the 80s, I want to say. I'll correct myself on screen. So that one would also be on my list. And then there is a YA series, but that I would consider more late middle grade, maybe early YA, which is called Mundo, Umbrío. So kind of like the underworld. And I read the first book in that series a good many years ago. I don't remember when, but I actually didn't like it, but that I think is because I had the expectation that it was going to be more YA in the vein of Twilight. But it's actually, as I said, now that I read middle grade, I would consider it more middle grade. The thing is that here we don't have the YA category, so it's only called juvenil, so it's youth, it's like youth literature. And so under juvenil you get stuff like Twilight, but then you also get really younger stuff that is almost like at the tail end of middle grade. And so I do think it belongs to that younger side, and that's not what I was looking for at the time. But it is actually very funny and very clever, and now that I look back, I think if I was reading it knowing or considering it middle grade, I would really love it. And that one is about like an underworld type of thing that is like underneath Mexico City, kind of. And so you have this protagonist who finds out that one of her parents is a vampire. I read it many years ago, so I don't remember who, but one of her parents is a vampire, and so suddenly she's in trouble with mean vampires and she goes to the underworld and she meets all her vampire family who reject her because she's half human, and it's like her adventures in the underworld, but it is very local humor. It's a Mexican author, it's a underneath Mexico City, and so you have a lot of local humor, local jokes, and I think I didn't appreciate it at the time when I read it because I was looking for something more in the vein of Twilight, but it's not what I got. And again, looking back, I think I could really love it. So I just, in this moment, as of now, I have added it to my list for this project. So that would be it for today. Those are my plans for this project that I am currently working on. And thank you so much for the inspiration. Thank you to Elle from Elle Thinks, to Jenny from Jennifer Brooks, who I continue to think about and she still inspires me, and to Rachel and Bailey for Gothlitnovember. So thank you to all of the lovely booktubers for the inspiration, and I'm having fun. And if any of you want to join, either join in reading vampire books or Gothlit November, then by all means, please, I invite you to join. And yeah, that would be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon with another bookish video, and in the meantime, I wish you happy reading.